Welcome to another art tutorial with Mr. White. Today, we're learning about body proportion, which is a mathematical concept, a way of looking at things. Today, we're applying this idea to people, but it can be used for lots of different things in drawing. And it's a simple way of breaking things into smaller parts that lets us draw the whole thing more effectively and accurately. In art, proportion means the relative amount or size of one element compared to another element. We know proportions in math are things like 1/2, 1/6, 3/8. They're fractions. They represent how big one selection or one chunk of something is compared to the whole. So it's the same idea here in art. But again, comparison is key to proportion. We're looking for a smaller part of the body that we can reasonably draw, and then we draw everything else based on that by comparing how big the other elements should be to the thing that we're drawing. This gives us a way to make a system or to systematize drawing people so that rather than being a crazy chaos, we're able to draw them in a way that makes sense. Now, people are very complicated, and when we're using proportion, we want to find a relatively simple piece to start with. I think the simplest piece to start with is the head, and I'm not the only one who thinks this. In fact, drawing or sculpting with proportion has been done for thousands of years. The ancient Greeks figured out this method, and it involves picking a thing. We're going to pick the head, and then comparing the size of the rest of the body to that thing. We're going to first identify how many head heights the total body height is, and find the proportion of head to body height. We're going to notice a few other key measurements, including the width of the shoulders, the width of the hips, and the length of arms and legs. And I'm going to start with this printed out picture, and I'm going to be using paint to mark out the sizes. That just makes it a little bit easier for you to see what I'm doing. Tried this digitally, but I think the paint gives me better control with my hands, so it's a little bit easier for you to see what's happening. So first, I'm going to identify the size of the head by drawing the head. And you'll do the same thing when you're drawing people or when you see me drawing people. But the first thing is a head is a roughly oval shape, a little pointy on the bottom, and it's taller than it is wide. In general, a head should be about half again as tall as it is wide. But for our exercises right now, as long as it looks like a head, as long as it's taller than it is wide, we're going to be satisfied. And then I actually turn my paper and I use my drawing tool, my pencil, or in this case my paintbrush, as a measuring tool. I've isolated how big the head is with my thumb on one end and the tip of my paintbrush on another, and I'm drawing off on the side a line that shows where the top of the head is. I'm going to get that measurement, marking with my thumb where one side of the head is and my paintbrush tip where the other side is. And I'm going to measure and mark. Each mark I make shows one other head height that fits in the whole height. And I draw a line right beneath the feet, which we notice is about halfway between the bottom two head heights. So that's my whole body should fit between those two lines I made on the top and bottom. So again, I'm going to measure out each size over here, and I see the head should fit in once for where the head is, once beneath it, once again down to about the solar plexus or the belly button, once again down to the bottom of the hips, again in the legs, another mark that goes past the knee, and a couple of more. So I have identified how many times the head height would fit in the whole body. And I'm going to count that up, and I see that the head fits in once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6, 7, and not quite 8, so about 7.5 times. In general, people's body proportions should be between 6 to 8 head heights compared to total height. Children will have smaller ratios because children's heads are bigger compared to their bodies. Our heads grow very little as we get older, but our bodies stretch quite a lot. So I'm writing down this woman is 7.5 head heights in her total height. That is the proportion that we're going to use. Now, I'm also going to draw what we call a medial line. That's a line down the center or the middle of the body. This is a vertical line going down the center, and it helps us to see approximately how wide different parts should be. One thing I noticed, on either side of the medial line is about 1 head width for the torso. So we notice that the chest, the upper body, is about 2 head widths wide, not 2 head heights wide. We also notice that there's about half a head height of neck beneath the chin, and that takes up about half of that lower box. And then we also have the shoulders in that box. So here I am drawing in a head-shaped oval right between the medial line in the center and the edge of the torso. So that shows just what I'm talking about. We also notice about half of our height should be the legs, and you see that I am just measuring that right away. So the leg height to body height should have a proportion of 1 to 2. The leg's height would fit twice in our total body. Our shoulders should be about 2 head widths wide. And for really strong, brawny men, that could be as wide as 2 head heights wide. But that would usually include the outer edge of the arm. So as I mentioned, the height of the body should be about 7 to 7.5 head heights. Your shoulders should be 2 head widths. Your legs should be about half of your height. I'm also going to notice that approximately 1 head width fits in on either side of the medial line at the hips. So the hips should be about as wide as the top of the chest. But we notice the top of the chest has arms that extend past that. Our hips should be about 2 head widths wide. I also like to point out that the wrist ended slightly beneath the waist, just beneath the halfway point, and that the hand takes up about, goes down to about half to a third of the thigh height. One other key I want to point out, our legs should be approximately 2 even length pieces between the thigh and the lower leg. The upper leg should be thicker and the lower leg should be thinner, but they should be about equal.